Okay, so if you take away nothing else from our time together, I want you to take away one thing. There's no S in Pike Place. This is a farmer's market on Pike Place. It's the Pike Place Market. John Pike was a real guy. He was an early Seattle builder who constructed the early territorial university, which is why we have a University Street in the middle of downtown, no university to speak of. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I'm with the Friends of the Market. Who's heard of the Friends of the Market before today? Fabulous, great. Paula, you're amazing with this light game. The Friends of the Market got together back in the 1960s to preserve Pike Place from being torn to the ground. Between a number of factors, including the loss of 2/3 of our farmer contingent due to Japanese incarceration, the rise of suburbs, the rise of the supermarket, urban renewal, and the whole scheme in the 1960s of sending federal money towards city centers to tear down, run down, ramshackle, dilapidated old cultural places to make way for parking lots. We had a group of very intrepid and forward-thinking people, the Friends of the Market, that got together and spent 8 years fighting to save the market from being torn down. And here we are now. And it's pretty hip to see how all this kind of worked out. So, my name is Nick. I'm going to be kind of, sort of your host. Really, I'm just here to bring the really great talent to the game. This is Gene, this is Clay. Has anybody ever read the Seattle Now and Then column in the Sunday? Yeah. Good, that's them. They're my big celebrity get this year, and I'm stoked. But I work for the Pike Place Market Foundation in my day job. Has anybody heard of the Pike Place Market Foundation? Great, you might have met Rachel, the piggy bank out front there. Rachel is the Market Foundation's mascot and big philanthropist in Pike Place. She and her cousin Billy take home $20,000 a year in small bills and loose change to support the social services in the market. But let's see, I have some things for you all. In the back of the room on your way out today, if you're interested, the Friends of the Market, they still exist. We do a lot of educational and advocacy work in and around the market. Annual membership is $35. I've got some membership brochures in the back. If you took one of our Market Foundation annual reports to the community as well, this is for you to take to kind of get a sense of what the social service impact from the market is. If you're interested in getting involved in market politics, that's an easy way to do that as well through what's called the Pike Place Market Constituency. To be a member of the constituency, you got to be 16 or older, pay $1 in annual dues, and like the market. And you get a front row seat in market governance. The Friends of the Market are launching our summer tour program as well, so I brought along some flyers for that. If you want to get more of this amazing storytelling, I have my take on the market, but of course everybody's market experience and therefore market tour is a very different thing. And then recently the Friends, just a year or two ago, the Friends in partnership with History Link put together this small booklet on market history. I brought along a bunch of copies in the back for you to take with you as well. And lastly, and finally, the Market Wars. My goodness gracious. This is the story of how Pike Place Market was saved from being torn down in the 1960s. This was sort of relegated to a PDF scan of a Seattle Weekly article from the mid-'80s that the Friends finally were able to publish. So we brought along some copies of that for you all to take with you as well. With that said, Alyssa, what am I missing?
I think you covered it all, Nick.
Is that everything?
We're ready to introduce.
You're like, for crying out loud, bring on the talent.
Bring on the talent.
Okay, well, with that said, for this first hour of our time together, Gene and Clay will be taking you guys through an excursus of market history, and then I'll be bringing you on a 1-hour tour of the neighborhood, because I think the best way to really get a sense of the market is to experience the market and get lost here. So we're going to get lost together. And with that said, Gene, Clay,
all right,
I'll leave it to you.
Is it my imagination, or did the lights go up a little bit in the audience and then back down again a couple of times? If they could go up again, we could actually see you.
Yeah. Ooh. And since the focus, Paul, is not going to be on us, because we're not pretty enough, if we could bring the stage lights down, that's much better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, now this sign has been a part of our shows since Paul Dorpat was running the column, and he used it for about 20 years. And it's what we call an ironic sign. So the truth is, feel absolutely sanguine about interrupting, asking questions, were very, very easy. And in fact, we welcome talking during the performance.
How many of you recognize the name Paul Dorpat? Anybody in here? One, two? Paul is our column predecessor. He started the Now and Then column in 1982, and he continued it for an amazing 37 years, every Sunday, producing a column for the Sunday Seattle Times Magazine. Can you think of anything in your life you've done for 37 years, every single week? I like that. And we are in his debt. We are also,
I got a 37-year-old, Clay. That feels like every week.
That's right.
Nick, are you 37 yet?
I'm 40 now, thanks for calling out.
Oh my goodness. Well, we've been doing it for the last 5-6 years after Paul retired, but he's still alive and has his wits about him. I think he's got one wit left, but his wit is there. And we go visit him regularly, and we just are grateful to be able to carry on his legacy and his tradition.
Well, we only have, what time is it, Nick?
It is 1:09, 10 past the hour.
1:09, and we want to close this out by 2, don't we?
Yeah.
Do we want questions at the end? I think we probably do. So let's proceed apace, and we'll talk quickly and go through our many slides. Well, this is a classic image which looks up Post Alley, but it was not Post Alley these days. It was actually, you're looking at Chief Seattle's daughter, Princess Angeline. You can see the date is 1890. And she was, her indigenous name was close to, I won't say it perfectly, but it's Kikisobru. She was the daughter of Chief Seattle, off to the right, after whom the city was named while he was still alive. And I always wonder about that, since there's so many indigenous cultures who find that once you're gone, the repetition of your name brings you back, not in a good way. So I don't know if that was an honor or in the end a curse for Seattle to have his name said millions and millions and millions, billions of times after his death. So
There is a connection to that in the photo that you have up there, because this is the only known photo ever taken of him, and he has his eyes closed. If you see a photo with eyes open, that's Photoshop.
Yes, they've added the eyes. So this is in 2018, we've been back into the market, and we'd like to start with this slide because this is long before the market, the 1890 date when Angeline posed for a photograph in the market. She was known for posing for photographs in the last 20 years of her life, and was one of the most popular subjects in Seattle. And in fact, we'll come back in a moment, but she lived only about 2 blocks from where we are right now. That was where her cabin was. Well, these are direct descendants of Seattle. And Mary Lou Slaughter is on the left. Her heritage is Duwamish. If you ever go to the Duwamish Longhouse, you will see the designs from her basket work are used in the Duwamish cedar floor.
The Longhouse is down West Marginal Way in West Seattle, across the bridge.
Next to her is a good friend of ours, Ken Workman, who's another son of Seattle, great-great-great-grandson of Seattle. And Ken has an interesting story because about 20 years ago, Ken had a Mormon friend who looked into his ancestry. And Ken knew that he had significant native stock, but was always a little bit ashamed of it. And his friend looked into his ancestry and came to him and said, Ken, you're a direct descendant of Seattle. And so Ken embraced that, and now has been studying Lachute seed, is nearing fluency in his language, and has become an elder in the Duwamish tribe.
And if you ever get a chance, you see him on a billing somewhere, providing a welcome to an event, don't miss it. He will set
It's
there
really
on the back of your neck.
Anyway, so here's the story that goes with this little photo, and then we'll move along quickly. When I took the photo, this was for a book that we brought out called Seattle Now and Then, The Historic 100. And when I took this photo, Clay was standing behind me, and I was taking the picture, and at a certain point, the alley was pretty empty, and at a certain point, Ken said, "Gene, hurry up. Take the photo, there's people trying to get through." And Clay and I looked at each other and we said, "What are you talking about?
There's no people here.
There's no people here, it's just you and Mary Lou."
He said, somebody's trying to touch my elbow.
Someone is tapping my elbow. and we just kind of, at that point I thought, no, you're kidding me. He says, no, someone was trying to get through, get past me. And I thought, you know, we'll just call that a nudge of history. Here's the shot. And there's nobody behind him. This is about the time when he said, "Gene, pick up the pace." So here we are, a classic shot from 1891, and it has, so Kiki Soglu had been monikered Princess Angeline by Doc Maynard's wife, Catherine Maynard. She was held in great affection by the settlers and lived in poverty, although the city fathers and mothers gave her basically what would you call it, Clay, a pass in the groceries. So she was allowed to gather groceries from the local grocers. And finally, and was close to the Esslers as well, and finally when she died, was buried up in Lakeview Cemetery, right next to Henry Esler, and has her own monument up there. But this is a story that the great Northwest historian David Berge calls the Seattle's original sin. Because we really did show up, we were welcomed, and then we did not behave in a way that was quite as welcoming. So this is a cabin down below us, and if you ever walk down just north of Pike Street, there's a little, the Pike Place parking garage actually sits next to an alley, and that alley extends. You can't walk into it because it's just a green, filled with green shrubs. There's the fixed Mador building and this alley, and then the parking garage. And this little cabin was perched somewhere in that alley. And I think we have a picture of of Ron Edge, who is one of our great photo archivists, sitting on a set of boulders. And there's, on the right is the fixed Mador apartment building, and on the left is the parking garage. Neither were there when Princess Angeline sat for her portrait.
You can see how narrow this is, but one way you can look down upon this site is to go to Lowell's in the market. Are we going to Lowell's or past it, Nick?
We'll go out to the Secret Garden where we'll have a nice vantage down there.
Yeah. Well, if you go up to the second floor of Lowell's and look out the window, you can look straight down on this.
And let's go forward. So this is a classic shot, one of the great photos of the market. It was probably taken in September of 1907. So it's a month after the market opened. The market opened, and Nick, I'm sure, will regale us with this story, so I'll keep it brief. But the market opened as a result of city customers, grocery buyers, who were sick and tired of the middlemen. Most of their headquarters were on Western Avenue, and they really jacked up the prices between the farmers and the consumers. So, in a wonderful act of rebellion, the market was opened up along Post Street along Pike Place, sorry. And it was a rainy Sunday, what was it, August 17th, was that the day?
Yeah.
On this rainy Sunday morning, only fewer than a dozen farmers came out. They were all skeptical, like, will this work? Can we offer direct to the customers without going through these users, middlemen? And so they opened up the market, and by like 10 or 11 in the morning, they sold out. And the rumor went around, the gossip, and the next time around, the farmers showed up en masse. And within a month, this is about a month later, you see that crowds surround every single wagon, and it never looked back. So we're seeing this early market picture, and let's look at it today. And of course, we see this sort of beloved place to now.
One thing, can we go back to the previous slide just briefly, some context? Seattle was growing greatly at this time. This is after the Great Seattle Fire, this is after the gold rush. And in that particular year, 1907, Seattle was annexing land all over the place. Ballard came into Seattle, then West Seattle came into Seattle. So there was a huge market for the market.
One of the issues that keeps popping up, and it's an interesting one because there are many sides to it, but looking at a slide like this, you can see how pedestrians and cars interact. And one of the big issues that has divided the market to some extent is how do we negotiate the need of the sellers in the market? How do they restock? How do they, and the people who live here, the hundreds of people who live in the market who might need ambulances or fire trucks, or how does all that intersect, and how does it, hopefully not, collide with the cars coming into the market? And and I actually wrote about this last year, and Nick was lavishly quoted. What do you think today, Nick? What's your feeling about shutting down the street to traffic?
Well, I mean, it comes down to whose experience is centered, right? And like you mentioned, there's 450 residents in the market. Most of them are seniors. We've got 550 or so small business owners, many of whom are themselves the ones doing their deliveries. You probably, when you came down here today, you saw that there's the big road closed signs right there at First and Pike. So because of this moment of construction that's happening at the foot of Stewart Street that we'll see later today, the Market PDA, who are the landlords of the market, are trying this pilot program to figure out how do you balance it. It's always been this mixed use kind of neighborhood, this really unique mixed use. But we're feeling ever more pressure to pedestrianize the market.
Right.
But how do you do that in a way that is also sensitive to the unique context and the needs of this community that exists on a daily basis?
Right.
I'll say that the street being closed has been really nice. I was really skeptical, and I think there's a lot of feedback that's yet to collect. But you know, it's 2025 for crying out loud, and if we can't do it here, can we do it anywhere, right? So that's part of the concept of the market too, is having this opportunity to experiment with things. So
Right.
it's still fraught, but when done in a conscientious and kind and with an eye towards sustainability kind way, I mean, it's looking like we're finding a way to sort of navigate the straits a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting in particular because the market has always been a place where these collaborations happen. Where if you walk down the street rather than under the covered market, you'll note that cars are forced to travel very slowly. It becomes like a crawl through the market. And So then the question becomes, how do we maintain safety and access, and at the same time not turn the market into a fisherman's wharf, like in San Francisco, where it's just about tourism? Because I think that's one of the things that's precious about the market, is this sense that especially now that the Overlook Walk is open, it's become a place for locals to explore again, because it feels like it's just opened another door. And I'm curious to see what happens this summer with our new waterfront, because I think that's going to change the dynamic enormously. Anyway. Well, Nick mentioned the Friends of the Market. Well, this is an early protest. Actually, it's a late protest. This is right before the 71 initiative that was voted upon by Seattle voters and won overwhelmingly to save the market. Who's that in front? Does anyone know? Can anyone give us the name? This is your test. You'll never forget. If you go to the north of the market, you will see a park named after him. It's Victor Steinbrook. Victor was a really interesting guy. He, as you know, Nick mentioned, he'd been involved with this for 8 years, I think, by this time. He essentially was one of the instigators of preservation in Seattle. And he quite literally led the marches in front of City Hall. City Hall really looks like a file cabinet in this picture. It's in the same location today, but
Phyllis Lanphier, by the way, was a Seattle City Council member, a leader on the council.
so Victor was inspired by a major teardown. But I think we have that coming up next.
Yeah.
Here we go, and they don't want the market replaced. And again, as Nick said, the market was, at this point, was seen as an eyesore by the developers and by City Fall. And the mayor was leading the charge to take federal money to tear it down and replace it.
Well, there was, the context here is, you hear the phrase urban renewal. This was going on all over the country. It was the new thing, to tear down the old and bring in the new.
So let's go back to just before, here we are. No, we came forward. I'm saying go back in the temporal sense. So here we are in 1908. This is a year before the Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition.
Our first World's Fair.
Our very first World's Fair. And this, if you look closely, you won't see the tower that would appear right above this marvelous, it's a hotel called the Seattle Hotel.
Gene, we should clarify, this is not the market.
This is not the market. No, I'm giving hints now.
All right.
So if we saw this today, we're going to see it today in a second. This hotel sat right in front of, until the World's Fair, sat in that location, right in front of
The Smith Tower.
Smith Tower. So let's see it today. Let's take a quick look. Now look at the base of the Smith Tower. This marvelous hotel was replaced by the sinking ship Garage.
That's the affectionate name for it right now.
And there were preservationists who were appalled when the Seattle Hotel came down, amongst them Victor Steinbrook. So Victor was involved, had already been working to save Pioneer Square, because there was an effort to rebuild and destroy Pioneer Square. Also, the market, and his designs probably resulted in the Space Needle. They were on a napkin, and he's not accurately quite credited, but he certainly was influential in creating what looks like our Space Needle today. But if you look at the base here, you see this stunted little parking garage, and that's what replaced the Seattle Hotel. And that was considered such an affront right before the Second World's Fair, to replace this marvelous building. And it was quite lovely. It was just a beautiful place with this little stunted creature at the bottom there. Now, if you look at it, you can see this is the Pioneer Building off to the left, which was built right after the fire. I mean, that's like, the date for it is, what, 90, I think? 1890. Seattle Fire, 1889. So, if you look at it, you can see the sort of the front prow of the sinking ship garage, and they tried to be reflective of their environment. If you look behind the ship itself, the garage itself, you'll see these wonderful kind of basket-shaped building windows at the top there. Well, look at the top of the sinking ship. See those wonderful little railings, how they're basket-shaped?
This is sarcasm.
That's a real reach, huh?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. They really made an effort. They thought, oh, at least we can reflect our, the current environment. Anyway, so Steinbrück took one look at this and said, that's hideous. Let's save stuff. And the next thing you know, he headed up to the market because the threats began to come fast and furious in the early mid-60s. A great photo of the market in 1911. There you can see it's established enough that within 4 years of its founding, we had a post alley which ran down and then along, does a turn right below where that fellow is walking down Post Alley. And it became, and you're looking across at this again, the wagons would pull up and people would begin to purchase.
And deal with horses as well.
Yes, filled with vehicles and horses, and really an exuberant place. I think whenever I see the market in old photos and when I see it even today, it feels like the best part of a three-ring circus. I mean, I've been coming here since I was 12 years old, and on my own, and I would come in from Bellevue, take the bus in, and spend the day and the evening in the market, and it always felt like the very center of the Seattle experience. And when I was 12, Seattle was a miserable place. Well, it was. Really
We were in Bellevue.
Yeah, but that's why I left. That's why I left. All right, let's see it today. Here we go. Well, this is after Victor and crew saved the market. The next thing that had to happen was, and it hadn't happened here, this is the market I remember from being a kid, is the corner building of the market was a little disaster area. It was decrepit, the roof was leaking, it was falling apart. I remember that taco joint. And there was a barber college in the corner there. It was unreconstructed and somewhat unloved. Well, the next slide we're going to see is from 1976. And in a year and a half, that's what they did. There's the flower shop. They buffed it all up. They fixed the interior. I mean, this is some major, wonderful reconstruction. Changed the structure of that corner building and made it gorgeous. And the clock, now, in this photo, tells the time. Let's keep going here. Oh yeah, here it is, just a few years ago. Same building. And I always like to show this in reverse, because the corner market once had something else standing. Yeah, that's good, that's good. It was in reverse, Nick.
Oh, yeah.
Now you make going forward. Now, there in reverse. Now, back to what was once there. There we go. Well, this was the Hotel York, built in 1890. Now, the Seattle fire actually, it burned many, many blocks of downtown, but it never got very far north. It stopped at University, right across from where the Art Museum is today. So first in University, that was as far north as the fire got. But So there was a huge building boom that went on after the fire, and the entire city was rebuilt in brick and stone, as the residents of Seattle insisted. No more wood. Well, the Hotel York was one of the structures that was built. And the marvel about this place was, so this is 1900, and in its first decade, you could sign up, you could stay there and have all your meals from the little York Cafe, starting probably 1890s for $1 a day. Which I know, it probably was $1,000 today, but no. For $1 a day, you went on the American plan, and you could stay in the Hotel York and be fed in the York Cafe. I think it went up to $1.50 by the time the place closed. Well, the thing about the Hotel York, and the reason they took it down, was illustrated by our next slide. This is, you can actually see the Hotel York up on the hill up there, I think. It's the blocky building up there. Well, this was in preparation for washing away the banks leading up to what was to be a tunnel. This was a tunnel that Seattle's chief engineer convinced the head of Great Northern Railroad to dig, which would go under the city of Seattle and start here, right about Virginia, and go all the way through to Washington Street. And some wags would say, well, it's the longest tunnel in the world. It runs from Virginia to Washington. It wasn't a very good joke then either. So let's take a look at the next slide. This is 1903. By 1904, the tunnel had met in the middle. They started down where King Street Station is today, and they started digging towards each other. And they had no lasers, they had nothing but math and good calculations. And so they started in 1903 from both sides digging, hundreds of workers. And they dug for 1904, and they met in 1904, in October 1904, in the middle with inches to spare. I mean, they really, really hit it perfectly. The tunnel, I think, is at its deepest beneath 4th Avenue and Spring Street at 111 feet. And about that same level under Marion Street, they found the remains of a primeval forest. And the moment they exposed the forest, it all turned to mulch. I mean, instantly, it was anaerobic. And so the moment it was exposed, it just turned into mush. Well, the cool thing is this tunnel was, for its time, the widest and tallest in the world. 30 feet wide and 26 feet tall. That was the widest and tallest tunnel in the world in 1904. And it only ran for a mile. Is it a mile? So up above, there's our York Hotel. Well, what happened was, when they started to dig the tunnel, everyone in the York who was trying to dine on their pancakes found that the York Hotel was shaking because the tunnel went, as you can see, it really just curved right under the foundations. And they realized that, and the York was, I think, 8 stories tall. And so they realized very quickly that it was not going to survive the completion of the tunnel. And so they tore it down and replaced it eventually with the corner building. But that's how the York disappeared, was due to that tunnel. Here it is before it was covered over. This is a column I did in COVID days. This is right before the tunnel was covered over, and now you can just see it through the cracks. If you look down from the market, you'll probably walk today.
Yeah, we'll take a little walk over there.
Look over the edge. The entrance is still there, the trains are still traveling, but it's now covered by Zizilalichway. Say it there.
Zizilalich?
Zizilalichway. There we go.
Easy.
So now it's covered, you can see the trains pass in this tiny triangle market. Oh, here it is with Zizilovich Way being constructed, not quite yet polished off, but that's essentially what we see today, that tiny triangle.
What are they mainly carrying?
What are they?
Mainly carrying?
I still didn't hear.
What are they mainly carrying on the train?
What did they name the?
Mainly carrying.
That's the
Oh,
Amtrak.
what are they mainly carrying? They carry everything. It's the entire, so that tunnel runs up and down, it's the north-south tunnel. It also carries passengers. So if you're headed on Sound Transit, you'll be using the tunnel going north on a passenger train out of King Street Station. So, and a lot of freight trains, as people who live on the waterfront or near the waterfront know, there's an endless number of freight trains that pass through. So I think it's basically our big avenue, or shipping avenue. Yep.
Not exactly the scenic route.
No, not the same thing. So here we are, and I'm really proud of this photo because I took this in just before the viaduct closed. And if you remember the viaduct, it ran for about a little over a mile on the waterfront. And many people would come to blows about its beauty and attractiveness. Clay and I actually fought it out. Clay's from West Seattle, and so whenever we do a show,
Seattle's lifeline.
that's right. Clay his viewpoint was, it's a viewpoint.
It was the best view of Seattle in Seattle.
He absolutely loved it. So we do programs and then we arm wrestle. And
then we take a vote.
Then we take a vote to see whether people wanted to keep the viaduct. It was already long gone by the time we were making these votes, because the viaduct had already, at this point, it's already got, the tunnel was dug. This is 2019, and so it's fait accompli. It's just awaiting disappearing at this point.
That's a remarkable picture.
Isn't that nice? Well,
You know
wait till you see the next
That
one.
is amazing.
Beautiful.
So that's the Overlook Walk.
He was really glad to get the match.
I was so delighted to get the match. Especially because it's rare that we actually make money, but I made a few shekels off of those two photos because field operations, the people who designed the Overlook Walk, wanted them.
Yes.
And they were so close, it was just like, oh, that's now and then. So
That playground is getting used all the time.
that playground
That's amazing.
is just an incredible place for, and the original design for it, the fellow who designed the Highline Walk, what's his name? Let's call him Marvin Hamlish. He created a slide that went all the way from the market to the waterfront. And it was like, suddenly Seattle engineers and safety concerns predominated. Well, wait a second, what if they just go faster and faster? So now the slide goes about 6 feet.
The two photos you just saw, this one and the one previous, they're a great illustration of what our column founder, Paul Dorpet, liked to call the column as a game of hide and seek. He said readers love to look at one and then the other and see, well, what's there, what's still there, what's changed. And that makes it a lot of fun.
That's a
So Clay,
big
are
hide
you
and
happy
seek.
now? Is it okay with you now?
Well,
I love it.
it's reality. I'm adjusting.
No, I absolutely love it. So quick, let's just look back at the viaduct. This is April 3rd, April 3rd, 1953, the day before the viaduct opened. And we found these, I'm convinced they were models in red. I think they were paid to walk out there and have their photo taken. But there's Smith Tower in the background.
Keep your eye on Smith Tower.
Yeah, Ian Smith Tower, here we go. Let's do our modern version of that. There it is. And I found a red car.
Gene spent 6 hours driving back and forth looking for that red car.
Red car. Well, the viaduct was still up until 2019 when we started tearing it down. And this is the viaduct from about 3 years ago. Just
Couple
after
years
it was
ago.
done. Yeah, 22. So here we are, another shot looking down the viaduct. And on the final day, let's go forward, on the last day of the viaduct, where the last day before it was closed, and some of you may have gone out there, it was kind of a marvelous moment when they just let everybody walk up and down the
It
viaduct.
was incredible, the weather was great,
Yeah.
just tons and tons.
This is like February 2nd,
Yeah.
early spring. This is the staff of HistoryLink, our state history, online history. If you've ever get the chance, just type HistoryLink into your browser, and you will find an enormous compendium of thousands of articles of state history. And Marie McCaffrey, who's second from the left, is the recently retired director of HistoryLink, and just to her right is Jen Ott, who's now the director. And their offices are just above us in the market. In fact, I think they're just above us, right?
About 2 floors up. Did you suggest to Jen to wear the red jacket?
I never did. But look at that, they all wore red. It was just like a celebration of communism or something.
Paul Dorpat also was a founder of HistoryLink, and
So as we came back there, I snapped Clay with his cubby hat on, and yeah, I don't think I included it this time, Clay, but Clay is standing about on the same parallel of the building in which his parents met and courted.
the building, well, enough said, we gotta move. The building without which I.
There it is, there's your building. It's still there,
My dad worked on the 10th floor, and my mom worked on the first floor.
just above the pig, right?
Right above the pig.
Well, this is a mid-30s. I'll just suffice it to say that by the Depression, the market was incredibly popular during the Depression because it did offer great deals for shoppers, and people were really struggling. And so the market became a sort of a wonderful another place to go and shop. I love the set of theater lights, which are still there. They're like marquee lights, and that's always been part of the market for me. It's always putting on a show, and those lights say to me, "This is my dressing room."
Well, you know that was intentional.
I know.
Okay.
I've always loved it, Nick. Thank you. It was Nick's grandfather who put those theater lights on. So here we are, about 10 years ago. So you can still see those marvelous marquee lights.
That's about where we bought our wedding rings, Gene.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's you, Clay. So now we're looking north up the market. This is kind of a marvelous structure because very quickly they realized they needed a northern arcade to be covered. It got, it was raining 9 months out of the year, so it's great to have an arcade. This was actually put up within about 4 years of the market's founding. This building went up in 1911. If you look down, you can see below it Western Avenue and Pike Place coming along here. Well, at that point, talk about traffic. People would scream up Western Avenue to a hairpin turn onto Pike Place and come down Pike Place. And it was all so they could get onto First Avenue without having to climb up Virginia. If you've ever had to walk up Virginia, it's really a struggle with the cars from the teens and 20s. They were grateful when they didn't have to pop the little radiator cap when they got up to the top. So they would make these, it was a much gentler incline coming up Western, doing the hairpin turn and then coming down. But it led to some, I think there were a number of accidents that finally made it, people got a little bit unhappy with the speedsters.
Well, there's a couple interesting things in here too, Gene. You can see on the right side of the photo, the cars are going both directions.
Yes.
So it's a one-way street today.
Both
Clearly not
directions
always the
today.
case. And then there's that little castle-looking building in the very back.
the armory. Let's go there.
Let's go.
Oh, this is today. So here we are today. You know, Market, the annex was still under construction when I took this photo. And there's this is the Siemens home. I will make no jokes about it. And I went to, again, the fixed Medora appears because I was shooting its repeat through the window. You can see what Nick is mentioning, the turreted castle on the hill, which is actually the armory. And so we jump up. This is Western Avenue. The market is up on your right. Okay, and today, again, this looks about the same location. You can already see the cruise ships down on the waterfront. And
There's terminal sales.
there's terminal. Yeah. Okay, and let's jump forward. And there we have the armory, which was actually a wonderful structure, and they designed it like a castle, but it was a great place for dances. Everyone went to dance at the armory. Okay, keep popping through. We have a telephone booth here that tells you this is, pre-cell phone. And then here's the tragic end of the armory. Taken from Aurora, it was probably burned down. Probably arson caused this event. A Seattle PI photographer went out, found his way out onto the closed viaduct and shot the armory being burned down. The bricks were reused. Yeah, okay, go ahead. All right, well, this is interesting because, coming up from the waterfront was a bit of a slog. And it was not, so you have lots of brambles and blackberry bushes, and you're coming up, you see those well, you'll recognize in a second, you see the market sign up through the slot there. This is Pike coming up from the market. And there are, and I know these fire escapes well, because one of them feeds onto a little theater that once stood just above us called the Stage One, where I was a young actor at the age of 14 or something. But after the show, we'd go out under the fire escapes and have a beer. And here we are. That's the steps as they pretty much look today, coming the same. So a little bit of an improvement. I prefer the flowers and the solid concrete to the haphazard construction. Another wonderful shot, early market, 1907. And you're looking again at this, kind of the popularity of the place. This happened quickly. It went from a handful of wagons to farmers as far as the eye could see.
In the very beginning, was it only flowers and
Oh, no.
food, or did it at that point?
It was almost entirely food and produce.
And how far away did they come from?
How far away to Tacoma?
No, how far away did the farmers travel to come to?
Boy, they came from the entire, they would leave early in the morning and then come all the way up to the market and set up. But they were there, they were setting up at 5 and 6 in the morning. So how far do you think? Skagit Valley?
Skagit, the islands, Maple Valley, really all around. I don't think we had many farmers coming out from the east side of the state, but I wouldn't be surprised if at least some made the weekend trip.
Just to sell on the weekends, yeah. No, it was a way for the farmers to avoid the guys in the middle too. So, yeah.
Some of my friends' parents were immigrant vendors in the market.
Really?
And they've told me stories about it, yeah.
God, it's fantastic.
Immigrants.
Really a marvelous place.
There's, like Gene was saying, with the Klondike Gold Rush, we saw huge amounts of people coming out here. And so, the early market was home to, there was a large Scandinavian population, French, Dutch, Italians, Chinese, Japanese Americans, a lot of Sephardic Jews from the Eastern Mediterranean coming out as well. So it was really it was a babble of different languages. Yeah.
And I always thought that, the Seattle chill is a new thing. There's none of that there. Look at that. These are people interacting.
And these are locals, they're not tourists.
Yeah, no tourists would go to the market. So this is looking back up from the front door of the market, up, straight up Pike, 1931, beginning of the Depression. This is 76, and I will only point out on the far right, if you ever knew the market or read about it, that is the infamous donut shop, which stuck around for a long time. It was there when I was there as a kid, and it was where we knew that bad things would and could happen. So there's the donut shop.
This was before Penny's abandoned downtowns as well.
That's right. This is more recent, taken with I have a 20-foot extension pole to put my camera on top of. So when I try to get to the second floor, I can actually get pretty high.
This is a heavy camera. You don't want to see Gene putting his camera up there in, a stiff wind.
Right, it's terrifying for people below. That's why the pole is yellow. It's a bright yellow pole. Yeah, let's keep going. Oh, so
All right, this is for shock value only. This is from the Seattle Times. Newspapers love to do occasional April Fools. So this is 1990 Seattle Times, and this is 35 years ago. And I put this in here to show you how prescient sometimes things can be. I mean, who knew that Trump would be in the position he is now? But it also sets a tone. It's sort of a shock value piece to think of, well, what could the market have become? But we are facing a backlash right now politically in our city and state toward the whole process of saving treasure buildings. And so let's go to the next slide. This will be an example of what Gene and I do often in the column. We'll take an old photo and try to match it in the now. And this is not in the market. This is not too far away, though. It's down on Denny Avenue, or Denny Way, what's the matter with me? And it's the Seafirst building. It was built in 1950. It was considered a real representation of mid-century modern architecture. And then, Nick, you can go to the next slide. This is what it looks like today, only it's not a bank building anymore. It's a Walgreens. And it was, at the time, considered a very customer-friendly building because you can see on the right, you could drive in and there was a booth where you could do your banking business from your car. And you see the pillar on the right that sort of marks the whole spot. Well, this was landmarked by the City Landmarks Board, I think about 15 years ago. Well, 2 years ago, part of this backlash I'm talking about is that we have had a very strong landmark ordinance in Seattle for more than 50 years, about 52 and counting. And part of that strong landmark law is that there is a landmarks preservation board that evaluates every nomination that anybody submits to landmark a building. But in this case, 2 years ago, the all-inclusive word housing came into the debate. Housing, there are people out there who say housing is more important than anything, and they interviewed to the point that this got elevated to the city council. City council has ultimate say over landmarks, but they rarely over the past 50 years have interviewed, but they interviewed on this one, that somehow they thought that, and initially they voted in committee to take away all the controls on this building. But a compromise was reached whereby they saved the building but not the surrounding property. But it was a real harbinger of the future. And so what the Landmarks Board had been doing rather independently is now under the watchful eye of the city council, who realizes that they can step in at any time and change what the board does. Okay, next slide. We bring us up to date today. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you haven't heard, I can guarantee you, nobody in this room really has heard much about this. There was a bill in the legislature this session that incredibly, how many bills do you know in any legislature that get passed unanimously? If you look at the bill in the House, it was 95-0. In the Senate, it was 47-2. Those two people were absent. And then the revised bill is still 93-0. This is a bill that is specifically aimed at Seattle and Tacoma, which have landmarks ordinances, and it says that you no longer can nominate and designate a building without owner consent. And that has been a hallmark of the city's landmarks law here for more than 50 years. There are some treasures out there. I was involved in saving one of them, the Admiral Theater in West Seattle, that would not be standing today if that provision were in effect now. And the historic preservation community now is stunned by this action in the state legislature. And the purported reason was housing, that we need to do everything we can to keep from preventing developers from building housing. And, you know, we have more than 450 landmarks in the city. That may seem like a lot, but it's less than 0.5% of the buildings in the city. And the developer bulldozer is going 24 hours, 7 days a week. This was clearly a developer's bill, and we're still trying to figure out how it came out of the blue and got a unanimous vote. And the governor signed it just a couple of weeks ago.
Just to give a sense of how egregious this is, I mean, really the way to discuss it, and we'll be very brief here, but the way to discuss this is to understand that Washington State is one of the, always has been one of the least friendly to landmarking states in the country. And it's wild. We're one of the handful of states that let churches evade all landmarking laws. So if a church owns a building, they can tear it down no matter what its age, and because of religious freedom. So it's odd that this state in particular, which has always been a little bit suspicious of any landmarking, that at this point we have just gutted what would be protection for Seattle and specifically Tacoma buildings. And I think that I don't think we're going to see, for all of the fine words, I don't think we're going to see an increased sort of low-cost housing as a result of having no more landmarks available.
And Gene, just to bring it back to the market, imagine if this new law were in place when the market was being saved. I mean, the political winds have shifted. Just want you to be aware of that. And what a treasure the market is, and the fact that it is in place.
That's right. If they had post-dated this law, or because basically they gave it a 100-year window. So anything that's older than 100 years could be landmarked. Anything that's younger, forget about it. So when the market was saved, it was only 54 years old. So we could have easily lost it. Let's go forward, and we're going to now race through. Okay, horse meat in the market, wartime horse meat. Nobody wants to eat it today, except that's it where Mr. D's is today. He doesn't serve horse meat as far as we know. Looking up Post Alley, which was kind of a little desolate. No gum wall in 75. Gum wall today. Here we go. We'll just do again. So 3 girls, 1917. So there's some stalwarts and standards that the market has always had, and there they are today. This was taken the first day that the governor shut down the world. And I think I got a photo of Nick, actually. Let's look. Oh, there he is.
That's why eggs were so expensive.
That's right. And Nick, you were given away for free, which ruined it for the rest of us. There's a gal who's a model, still up above. If you look up when you're wandering the market, you can see this on the east side of the market, up in one of the balconies. I mentioned Empty Space Theater. This is where they were located. These are a lot of Seattle's great actors. Here they are today. Boy, they're looking old. Now we did a whole piece on buskers. This is artist the Spoon Man, who now lives in Port Townsend. This is at Busker today, accordion cat, standing in the same spot. There's artists again, right across from the unreconstructed corner building. There we go. And here's one of Johnny Hahn, who usually comes out with his little tiny, very strange piano and then wheels it into storage.
We're going to go into totem poles here very quickly. This is not Seattle, this is Tacoma, and we're going to lead into the poles here at the market. But Tacoma, 60 miles south, was once considered, for a few years, the Hollywood of the North, and they made a film called The Eyes of the Totem. And this was based on the totem pole that some said was the longest, tallest totem pole in the world. It was installed by Tacoma business people. Well, let's move forward and we will see, when we talk about things coming down, things being destroyed, it's one thing to talk about them, it's another thing to witness it. And this is the pole, this is 2021, so 4 years ago, this is the pole the day that it came down. And the same thing through the advantage of a sculpture nearby. And here come the cranes. This is being torn down because the Puyallup tribe determined it was inauthentic and the city authorized it being taken down. 10-foot piece by 10-foot piece with a chainsaw. Originally, the Tacoma Historical Society was going to save the top piece there and the bottom piece, and the middle pieces were to go to the Puyallup tribe for their use for whatever they wanted. But then the Tacoma Historical Society gave up on that a few months later, and the pole is no more, and you can see the base is just sitting there as a base now. It's a huge debate in the historic preservation community. How much do you keep something to help tell its story, and how much do you wipe it away?
So
here we are in Seattle.
Stay tuned because we're going through the same thing this is Victor Steinberg Park, our market savior.
And that's Charlie Roy, the
mayor delivering the invocation and address to the crowd as Victor Steinberg Park opened, and the totem pole, which was commissioned by Victor, was put up behind him. So the story of these poles in Victor Steinberg Park is something that we're going to close today. Let's do a quick run through. There is the artist, Marvin Oliver, and his sister today, Marilyn Oliver Bard, and the poles now are on their way next week. They're going to be restored and repaired. They were in bad shape. They're going to be restored and repaired in Nia Bay, and I photographed them a couple weeks ago in storage in Discovery Park. And so they're going to be restored and in Nia Bay by a great macaw carver named Greg Colfax. Stay tuned. That's another fascinating story. Thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions, we'll accompany you on your walk. You can address us, just individually, or ask Nick. He probably knows more than we do. So, thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for your attention.
Thank you guys so much.